Abigail. What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about tweens. You've got a girl, I've got a boy, and we thought we should talk about it.
Probably it's good that they're in two different places in the world. Else we also might have a wedding in the future. Hi, I'm El Kwan in Hong Kong, and I'm your host of the Hand in Hand podcast. We're a non-profit from San Francisco operating globally, and we decode children's difficult behaviours one parenting challenge at a time.
And I'm Abigail Wald, founder of realtimeparenting.com and also a certified hand-in-hand parenting instructor. And every week, Elle and I like to get together and take a look at how we are using hand-in-hand tools in our everyday lives with our kids, and also help support you guys to do the same.
So, Abigail, when we talk about tweens, probably we should sort out what is this specific, is there an actual age range that is regarded tween?
Yeah, there's actually a country they all come from. No.
It does look like a foreign creature has migrated into my house at times.
Yeah, so tween typically refers to from 8 or 9 through 12 is what, we refer to as the tween years. And we kind of wanted to share with you what we've been seeing in our household. First of all, Elle, how old is your daughter now?
So my daughter turned 10 in January.
And my son is about to turn 11 in about a month. So, yeah, right in the middle.
So would you say there are definite behaviours or what have you noticed during this time? So if we say from 8.
Interestingly, I don't know if this was true for you, but with both of my boys, although I'm blacking out a little bit, the older one, I'm so going through it with my younger one that it's all I can see. He is 9. It's a double tween household right now. And,
wow, lucky you.
And so 8 and 9 were surprisingly volatile years, kind of like this whole other version of tantruming. That I did not expect, things that we hadn't seen since they were 2, 3, 4,
Yes, that
did
totally
you have that
happened.
Too?
Totally happened to us and took, I did speak to some of my friends about it. We were all in shock. I think it was all going on in all of our separate houses and everyone was shocked in isolation. And then I don't know who said, probably me with the big mouth was like, is anyone else seeing this? And it was like, yes, yes, yes.
So here we go. We're going to shock you all publicly. You might experience a major resurgence of the ever-loved tantrum.
The tween tantrum.
Yeah, lots and lots of really huge feelings with no brain ability to handle them. Complete meltdown with just big feelings. Interestingly, I can say for my younger son, because we're really going through it, a lot of it does seem to be about the sensitivity of perception, how others might perceive him or how an action might be perceived or things like that. That seems to be a real sore point.
Yeah, isn't there a big jump here kind of developmentally about what children are feeling or what are they going through at this point?
There's a really interesting cognitive leap that happens around this time where children do have a much larger awareness of others, which kind of is great because it's there's some more empathy and being able to see nuances in situations, right? And this idea that they'll be watching movies they used to watch with you as kids, but they'll get more of the grown-up jokes now. They're starting to see those nuances, right? But then there's also the sort of more sensitive side of that, which is really understanding that other people have feelings and opinions of you and you're out in the world and other people can see you,
Yeah.
That huge sensitivity to that too. And I think I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, that's interesting you should mention that because a lot of our big kind of epic meltdowns have unfurled because, she has a feeling of not being good enough. So a lot of it's around math. She has a bit of a problem grasping some concepts, and she is all too aware of this gap now that's happening between what her friends are doing, their abilities, and how she kind of measures up. And it's actually quite fraught to watch, you know.
Yeah, that's hard, right? To realize like you're kind of out of your own personal bubble and you're starting to see yourself in relation to other people and figure out, you know, well, who am I, right? And that's kind of one of the big things also is like this self-identity, right? Like trials, like both in the sense of like trials and tribulations of self-identity, but also like actually trying on, like one of my sons like kind of had this different personality for a while, and I was asking him, and he was like basically his answer was like, I'm trying this on, you know? And another friend was telling me that her child was like dressing completely differently, you know?
Oh, this makes quite a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm noticing that actually sometimes it's quite like talking to a different person. Yeah. It's not just, for us, it's not just, you know, wearing different things. It's mannerisms. It's things that she's saying that I'm like, that doesn't sound like something you would normally say. And she's just trying this stuff on for size. And because I know some of her friends quite well, I can see where these elements come from.
It's so funny. We're having this conversation and I am suddenly remembering there was a time I actually consciously memorized one of my girlfriend's handwriting at school. Gosh, this sounds so much like Single White Female, that movie, but like
no, but it's funny. It's like, so true.
I consciously memorized her handwriting and I copied it because I wanted to try what would that be like to be that person, right?
Yeah.
And I remember for like years I wrote like that until at some point I was like, yeah, that's not me.
Given
I
that
should have kept it because I think it was better handwriting than mine. But
oh dear. So what else can we see in terms of changes or how we should kind of adapt to them?
Well, one thing that's interesting to note, you know, for girls is that their self-esteem, there's quite a lot of studies about this. I believe the National Institute of Health actually did a study on this as well, that girls' self-esteem tends to peak at the age of 9, and for many of them will decrease rather sharply by the age of 12. And that's pretty intense, right? And if you think about that, and a lot of what's happening again is this constant measuring up against other people, which doesn't really make you feel good typically, right? But also the gender code is really starting to weigh heavily on these kids right now. Like, again, this goes with that line of thinking of like identity, right? So like, what does it mean to be a girl? And what does it mean to be a boy? And, you know, who am I supposed to be now? And like, oh, girls, you know, do this and do that. And there's so much messaging in our societies. And you can kind of understand this when you think about like, if they're getting so aware of comparison, right? And comparing themselves to others. And then also all the changes happening in their body and being self-conscious, right? And then what if they're not stacking up, sometimes quite literally, next to their girlfriends, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, all of that, right? All of those things going on. And that starts to really, it can often affect a girl's self-confidence and self-esteem. And then for the boys, you know, they're increasingly being told, what does it mean to be a boy, right? And, you know, feelings and love and vulnerability, these are not the things that boys traffic in, right?
Right.
And you see that in the movies. And again, you can start to understand why kids having access to their own iPhone or phone or, you know, being online unsupervised can be really challenging at this age, right?
Yeah.
So that's something I think both you and I have talked separately off of the podcast about how for us, age 10 started to be a little bit more of a smoothing out from the 8 and 9 tantrums. So there's a little good news there, right?
You're seeing that a little bit more than me, but then I think you're further towards 11 than I am. We've only just hit 10.
Yeah.
We're still getting, we're getting maybe not as many of the tantrums, but I've certainly still seen cries, and heart-wrenching cries, actually. And then some of, the other stuff, which is seemingly a bit more annoying, but expected, the hair flicks, the eye roll.
Yes.
A lot of that. That's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that some of this kind of chills out by 11 or?
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
No, I mean, I definitely get a lot of eye rolls. There's a lot of swagger and attitude in the boy camp. I'm sure some of the girls as well, because there's like a lot of newfound independence too, right? But there's, I've noticed it feels like, I don't know, he's just really so much more thoughtful getting closer to 11. Like so thoughtful, really, really knowing. It's so funny. I guess this goes along with this idea of like perception of others, right? He totally knows how to play me now. So like he now knows like what's important to me, and he'll use my words to get what he wants, right? So instead of like, it's really funny. Here's an example of like what this looks like. So, my son loves to play video games. We've talked about this, my oldest son especially, and although my youngest son now too. And I really limit, when they have access to it. So it's really only on the weekends for an hour a day. And so now over the week, if he really wants to do something, right, he'll come up to me. And whereas before, and it's so funny because you can literally see both parts of his brain. Like before he would just come up and be like, I want to play it, or something, right? And be like, and like this kind of grunty caveman.
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar with that sound.
Now he'll come up and he'll be like, Mommy, I've done all of my homework, and my brain is really needing like a place to relax. And I was just wondering if it might be okay if I did some of my video game time, but I wouldn't do like the one I do on the weekend. I would do this other one. It's kind of a little bit mathematical, and he'll give me this like whole speech. And then I look at him and I'm just kind of smiling at him. And usually the answer is, yeah, no, it's not a weekend. Yeah. Right? And then like he'll look at me, and it's so funny because the other part of his brain kicks in, but with an overlap of awareness. So then he'll look at me and he'll go, mean mommy. Right? And it's like he's half saying it and half like making a joke about himself. It's so sweet.
Oh. Well, may you have many more of those.
Yeah, I have to say so far it's really delicious. But, I'm sure there will be some challenging moments to be sure. So, yeah.
Catch us in 2 years when the episode is entering teenhood.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I know, it might be helpful for our parents if we talk about how we've changed using the tools, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, I've noticed it in two ways. And the first way is with special time, which was something, it was actually introduced to my daughter a lot later than my son, simply because I didn't know about it. But she was always quite ready to grasp the idea and go to it. And I could say to both of them, we'll have special time later, and then that would be something they asked for. But now I'm noticing that, I can still do that with my son who's 6 and he still loves it. But with her, she doesn't respond to those words, special time, in the same way. I don't know whether it's that she thinks she's a bit too cool for that, or whether she's differentiating herself from him, or whatever. And so I'll say, you know, what do you want to do for special time? And she'll be like, oh, no, I don't want to. I'm busy. I'm doing this. You know, and to start with, I was a bit affronted, like, ooh, I've been rebuffed. But then what I found was that actually if I just stuck around and looked at that thing that she was so busy doing, or, you know, just paid her a bit of attention while she was doing it, it actually wasn't that she didn't want me to be there. It was that she didn't want me to announce that this was a thing as much. So I had a little kind of back and forth for a bit because I felt like I wasn't doing special time properly, or but what I've kind of worked out just over the year I suppose it's been, is that, you know, she's actually fine when it ends. I don't have like the big tantrum at the end when I've got to go, the same as I saw when the kids were younger. It's much more like, oh, okay, yeah, you know, that was a good time together. Thanks for letting me hang out with you. You know, I have to go to the kitchen now, and that's fine. So I think it's really nice because during those moments is when she does start talking about things that might have happened at school, or, you know, she might be drawing and just, you know, then her brain will kind of let loose and let me in a bit. So, yeah, I think it is important that even though she's saying she doesn't want it, she still does crave that together kind of time, that connection.
Yeah, I find also my sons also really still needing special time. And, yeah, they haven't sort of taken a dislike to the words yet, but it has morphed. It's more about really like, I mean, it was always what they wanted to do, but now it's more like they have very specific ideas about what they want to do. Yeah. And they're like specific projects, you know? So it's really become much more like, you know, some things we can't do all in one time, but, you know, or it's like, okay, I'm going to take you skateboarding, you know, and you've never skateboarded before, right? Like, or archery, or, you know, like different things like that. So that's been interesting. More out in the world. That's what I'm noticing. More out in the world.
That's interesting. Yeah. The other thing I noticed in our house was just in the way that I stay listen now, because despite us saying earlier, you know, sometimes there are those mega meltdowns. I realised recently that as much of those is a new level of moaning and complaining, you know, whinging, I guess, that I was finding, or it got my hunches up actually, but it was because it was a new way for her to really talk to me. And I didn't know what to do with it. And then I thought, well, isn't it the same as stay listening? I mean, she's still just offloading. You know, her room isn't the worst room in the world. She doesn't actually think that. You know, that's her way of saying, like, something's not quite right. And actually, when I listened to that one, you know, I did the same as I would do with stay listening. Oh, yeah, you don't like your room. Yeah, it can be a bit dark, yeah. And it all came out, actually, you know, that there was an imbalance she felt between her and her brother's room, and the fact that she'd had to move a lot more than he had. And, you know, I wouldn't have known that if I'd have just shut down the complaint, I guess, against the room, which I have fought quite hard to make look nice for her, and that she normally revels in. So that, you know, that's different for us, because normally you're used to, you know, kind of an outburst and then the crying and all of that, and that wasn't what this was.
You know, it's so interesting. I'm hearing you talk about this, and I'm thinking that, you know, traditionally the response to that is like, don't sass me, right? Or how dare you be ungrateful, right? Or that's considered, talk back, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we weren't allowed to really complain. You know, we were always told, you don't know what you've got. Your life's so easy compared to what I had growing up. And all of that came up for me again when she started doing this.
Yeah. And I think that highlights like why doing this hand-in-hand approach, it can be so different, right? And, you know, that first impulse to sort of shut down that rude, sassy talk, right? And to remember that inside there is someone having a really big, true feeling that's probably connected to something actually pretty wise, right? Even if the sort of delivery method is really yuck. And, you know, it might bear actually going in just very quickly into like what's happening in the teen brain, right? So, you know, it's an interesting time for the teen brain, actually. The reward-seeking part of the brain is just like on fire, which is why you're going to see more impulsive, more quick thinking, like in terms of like quick to do things that they haven't really thought about. A lot of physical changes obviously going on, hormones. You know, sort of interestingly and disturbingly, the brain is going through this massive rewiring during these ages, right? And so it's another huge leap forward. And during this time, the prefrontal cortex, which is that sort of topmost part of our human brain that really is like the executive function, right? The really like thoughtful judgment part of our brain is kind of on hiatus. It's like taking a little bit of a back seat while all these other connections are happening in the brain. And there's a ton of rewiring and connectivity happening, and it's a really great surge of growth. But in order to do all that, that prefrontal cortex actually takes like a little bit of a break. And that break goes on through, you know, quite some time. And so that's why we
see the kind of this reactive, extra reactive behavior and things like this.
Exactly. So we just wanted to take a moment to, you know, meet our tweens and get to know them from the hand-in-hand perspective, and how that, you know, where does this all leave us as parents, and what are some of the feelings that you have during these years? Yeah.
I mean, what feelings have come up for you?
Honestly, I'm feeling really grateful. I'm really enjoying, I'm missing a tiny bit having babies, like, you know, knowing what I know now, like I didn't actually love it then.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I did. I loved it and I hated it. You know, there was just both. And now I feel like I would love it so much more. It's like that thing of like why grandparents get to come in and like, it's like, it's so great, you know? But
it's just that thing of you don't know what you've got until it's gone, that kind of thinking as well. Right? It's hard in the moment. When you look back, it's so rose tinted.
Yes, totally. And it's easy to look back and not remember how awful some of it felt, right? But it was also such a beautiful, magical time. And I think one of the things I feel so grateful for is this also feels still so beautiful and magical. And now I'm actually able to enjoy the ride while I'm on it.
That's quite comforting, yeah.
Yeah, so that so far has been really nice.
For me, I think I've been a bit kind of overwhelmed at times. I felt like maybe, I finally got this parenting thing, and then bloop, it changed again. And, you know, I think just watching her kind of move away a little bit, you know, step outside the family a little bit more. And, you know, when they're little, you're the ones orchestrating the play dates. You know who's coming over, all of this, right? Now seeing that she's got her own preferences, her own friends, you know, she's got stuff she definitely does want to do and definitely doesn't. And that's left me feeling quite out of control sometimes, just not quite knowing where my place is, where the boundary lines are now.
Yeah. I know, right? It's really crazy. It really makes us realize, like, oh, we are so preparing them for the world when we're not there, you know, on every level, right? Like at some point, you know, really ultimately not here. But until then, you know, which hopefully is not for many, many years, that this idea of the world away from us, right? And you can really start to see that them choosing to, have more sleepovers away and do things and be this different person. I look over at the yard and I'll see my son. I came to pick him up the other day and he's like laughing with a bunch of boys, and I can see them making these like crazy like physical jokes, but I don't know what it is because I'm across the yard, but just like seeing him out in the world, it's like if you've been at a dinner party and you like look across the room and you see your spouse, with new eyes, and you're like, oh my God, they're like a person in the world. Like, like that moment where you're like, oh, right. It's kind of fascinating. So there's definitely a lot of that.
What about, supporting them as they grow, making sure you do keep this relationship kind of intact and connected and close?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. Thank you for bringing that up. Such a good question, because I think it was really the heart of why we wanted to do this show, is to say that while all this is happening for them, the truth of the matter is they still need us so much. It's just you have to be cool while you give it to them, right?
You have to do it with the occasional hair flick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you can't like make a big deal out of it, but it's like they really still need us. And they kind of need us more than ever because they're getting more independent and doing more stuff, and they need to be able to come back and know that it's okay to have made mistakes and to ask for help and to navigate and still celebrate with them and really like enjoy all of their newfound enjoyments. I think that's really important, but they also really need us to set limits. And they need us to like support that growth and experimentation and yet still be that wall that they need on occasion. And we can talk more about that in future episodes. And in fact, that certainly comes up around tech use. And I'm doing a webinar coming up just later this month on March 14th with my friend Julia Storm, who is the founder of Reconnect Consulting, and she does a lot of work with media plans for families. And together we're going to hold a Tech and Tweens webinar. So we can put the link to that for you guys. And any of you who want to look for it, it's realtimeparenting.com/p/tweens. So, if you want to learn more there, you can, but definitely setting limits around tech, but also risky behavior when needed to set limits around it, right? When it's not a healthy risk, and, just staying really present, because they still absolutely adore us, even though it's just a little less cool to show it. Oh, that was kind of an enlightening talk. It was good to hear how it's going in your house. Yeah, it's great to hear how it's going in yours. I know. Our kids have never met. In fact, Elle and I have never met.
Yeah, isn't that weirdness? Modern technology. See, we can't totally diss it, can we?
Yeah, right.
So I guess for any of you listening who are in the same boat as Abigail and I and feeling that they would like some support, there is an older child Facebook group specifically for you, run by Hand in Hand, which you might like to join. I will put that in our show notes. And I know one or two of our instructors do hold starter classes for older kids. I know Anna Cole, who is in the UK, she's got one coming up. If you want to check that out, that gives you a deep dive into Hand in Hand's tools and how to apply them with your teen, which is perfectly apt for this episode. And I'll put a few good articles on the show notes too. You can find all the information there, handinhand.org/podcast.
Thank you so much, and we will see you guys next week.
Don't forget about those R's. Please rate us. Please review us. We love hearing from you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. They really make our day. We'd love to see that and love to hear your feedback. So thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Have a good week. Bye-bye.